I am Austin. I've been working in AAA games and the film industry for about 4 years now, doing a lot of, when I was in film, virtual production, which was still running real time in Unreal Engine. And then in AAA games, obviously real time as well. I worked on Forza Motorsport, John Wick, Planet of the Apes, just to name a few things. Today I'm going to be going over a quick introduction of modeling, and so first things first is finding reference. When selecting reference, I think it's pretty important, especially if you're newer to modeling, to get something that is from like a straight on angle. This one is a little tilted. I searched and couldn't find anything that was much better. So we're just going to go with this, but it's going to be fine, but just know that you can't perfectly match this one-to-one if you import it into your modeling software, which I am going to do. For Blender, all you have to do is grab your file and drag it into the viewport, and it'll automatically just add it to your Blender scene for you. And then I like to just zero this out so I can get it as a good starting point and then use my viewport as references. Just hit 0 and then tab to move to the next one. For Blender, I think it's important to note in Edit and then Preferences that there's quite a few different key mapping options. I'm using one that's very similar to industry compatible just because I learned Maya first. If you use Blender tutorials, everyone's pretty much going to be using the Blender hotkey map. Everything is the same functionality-wise, just the buttons that you press are different to get there. And if you're following on with this tutorial, Blender also comes with a bunch of add-ons with it. You'll want to type in extra curve objects and enable this. This adds a spiral that we'll use later on in the handle. So I have my reference here, and I know that I'm going to be modeling on the x-axis. To lock your camera to one of the directions, there's this gizmo in the upper right-hand corner of the viewport. You can just click on any of the buttons here, and it'll put your camera to that space. So I know that it's going to be at that angle, so I'm going to rotate my reference so it'll be lined up properly with that angle. That'll be 45 degrees. Cool. So the first thing that I like to do when starting a model is identify my base objects that I'm working with. When we add meshes to our scene, we're given this nice little menu with a bunch of options, but they're all what we call primitives. So I'm going to start on the actual blade of the sword. And I know that I want this to be a plane, just because it's going to be thin and easy to work with. You could also do a cube and that would work fine. So I am going to now rotate the plane to match the sword. I usually work in X-ray mode, so you can go to these shader balls in the upper right-hand corner as well. There's a bunch of different options up here, but viewport shading, this first one on the left is wireframe mode. That'll put your mesh into wireframe just so you can see through it and see the reference behind it. So as I'm toggling this on and off, you can see the reference come and go. I will work in this a lot. I have that bound to a hotkey. I would recommend doing that if you work in Blender a lot, but this is how you'll get back and forth. You can also move through your selection modes in the upper left-hand corner. These are vertex mode, edge mode, and then face mode. Again, these are bound to hotkeys. In industry standard, it's 1, 2, and 3, and I will switch through those a lot while modeling. So what I'm going to do is just basically match this plane to the outline of the blade itself. And then I'm going to not be super precise, but just get it close enough. And this is why it's nice to import your reference into your actual software. If it's not there, you can still do this. I also have it off on my other monitor, just so I can move around and see different details. So this matches up pretty decently. I also see that there is a line right in the middle. Blades are 3D and they usually have an extrusion right in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and add an edge loop. All of our tools are over here on the left side. And then a lot of these also have hotkeys. So a lot of the fast people just have hotkeys down. That's really what makes the difference. So we have this down, and I'll adjust that a little bit later. I'm going to keep adding edge loops because I'm going to focus on the top of the sword. So this just has a little taper in. So I'll add a couple edge loops and then just shrink the top down to make that point. And then if I go to edge mode, we can bevel it, and this will create a bevel. And then when we open up our settings, we can actually go in here and adjust how the bevel is being shaped. So this is just a pretty simple curve. So I'm just going to add in a couple segments and it'll give us a good outline that's pretty close to the reference here. For bevel, for me, it's B in industry standard. To bevel, some of these, like the extrude, have a bunch of different options. You can just hit the hotkey over and over again to switch between them all, but bevel does not. It's just the one, and then when you click on the circle to slide it, the bevel modifier will come down here at the bottom, and you can click it to open it up and see all the settings in here. Then again, I just add a couple edge loops to give us that curved top of the sword. Okay. So then I am going to add that 3D component that's on the front edge of the blade. You can click once to select a face, but if you double click it, it will select all connected edges. And then you can move them all at once. But what I'm actually going to do is move it and then deselect edges, because this isn't a good reference of it, but I know from swords, just observing them in real life and looking at real life reference, that a lot of times it tapers to a fine point at the top. So as I move this out, I'm going to hit Control and drag to deselect my edges. That way I can get a nice taper in as well. So the gizmo's a little low. It's hard to see and do at the same time. Okay, so I've created a nice little fade here. That way it's a little more curved, and we can go in and select the verts themselves and focus in on this curve just a little bit more. Cool. I chose this as a plane because I only wanted to do this adjustment one time. If you chose a cube, you'd have to do this on both sides in order to get it to look correctly. But since we only have one side, now we need to move it over. This is my favorite part of Blender, is the modifier panel. So over on the right-hand side of the screen is your properties panel. There's a bunch of different options. The one that looks like a wrench is your modifiers. The part of Blender that I really like is that you create a stack here, and these modifiers affect each other, and it's non-destructive. So just to demonstrate, I'll throw a mirror on, and it's already on the origin, so you can't see anything. There it is. So what I did is Blender also has a search function. So if you don't know where a button is, in industry standard, it's tab. You can pull this up and search for anything that you want. It's context sensitive. So if I have face mode, I can type in extrude and it'll come up with extrude edges, extrude faces. But if I'm in object mode, extrude isn't going to come up because you can't actually extrude an object. So that's a really helpful thing to have, especially if you're following a tutorial and using a different set of keybinds. But say, for example, I have this mirror modifier and I want a bunch of swords. I can throw an array afterwards and adjust these. So there's a bunch of options, but I can still go back to the mirror modifier and adjust it. So if I turn it on and off, basically, it will adjust it. That's why I like the modifier stack. That'll come into play a little bit later, but just as a quick introduction to it. We need this to come together. So here we basically have our blade. You'll notice that there's automatically this merge option. It's merging the two halves together automatically just because they're close enough. If we turned that off, there would be a small gap there. But it's nice to go ahead and keep that on since we do want this to be one blade. And since I'm going to do more modeling on top of this, I need to apply my modifier. If I go into object selection mode, you'll see that I can't actually select the back half because the modifier is not applied. It's a non-destructive workflow, but I can adjust something over here and it'll adjust on the backside still. So to apply the modifier, I'll just drop that arrow down and click apply. At the bottom of the blade, we have a little extrusion here. So again, I'll add an edge loop with the loop cut and drag that down to where it needs to be. And then a second one right below it. Here, we'll just select the edge loops. And if you double click close to this middle border, it'll select wide. If you select next to an up and down edge, it'll select up and down. And that's how it does it sensitive. So if you're close to the side, it'll go around the object. And then we'll go into our extrude. I already know that I need to extrude along normals for this. But if you're on a different one and you just want a hotkey over, me pressing the hotkey changes that image so you know which extrude it is. I will just select the edge loops and bridge them together. So just select the edge loops again by double clicking to get the edge loops I want, and then bridge the edge loops. And I'll add a face at the bottom. That way it's a watertight object. So right now there is open space at the bottom here. So that means if we were to pour water into this object, it would just come right out of the bottom. This is pretty important depending on your rendering engine. So this is a little more technical than like, I guess, an introduction course, but for example, I'll just make a new face. So now it's a watertight object. But if I were to take this face and separate it, so I have two different objects here, I can turn this face on and off. It's no longer a watertight object. And what the problem is that it has some normal issues and some light leak issues. Again, in engine, it's technical. Just know that most of the time you'll want a watertight object. It just means that if there's water inside, it can't come out. So again, I'll close this back up, and this menu is just the right click menu. So now I should be able to extrude this because I set it up correctly. Perfect. And it's not matching the reference perfectly, again, just because of the angle of the reference. This is kind of when you'll do your artistic liberties and your artistic ability to make it not perfect. I don't think in production you'll ever really have perfect reference. So just, you know, do your best, see what's there, look up rail swords if you're not familiar with them, and put that together and just come up with a solution to the problem. So this is the blade pretty much done. You'll notice that there's some weird shading artifacts at the top. That's because automatically everything is shaded as sharp in Blender. So if I'm in object mode and I right click, it'll come up with this objects context menu, but the one we want to do is shade auto smooth. And what that does is in the data property panel of your object in our normals tab, it has this auto smooth, and anything above 30 degrees right now is shaded as sharp. So if you look here, this is sharp shading, where it's smoothish smooth shading. So you can adjust this down to where you want it to be. And now this taper that we did at the beginning is nice and smooth, but the actual edge of the blade is sharp like we would want it to be. You can also do this manually instead of using the auto smooth. If I turn that off and just shade everything to smooth, I could select that edge, right click, and mark sharp, and it'll give me a nice seam here. Turn back on auto smooth, it will be sharp no matter what I have that angle set to. So that'll just always be sharp, whereas if it wasn't marked as sharp, it would not do that. I'm going to go ahead and remove that because I want to use auto smooth. Awesome. Moving on now, the blade is definitely the easiest part of this asset. We get to this blade guard at the bottom here. This is a really complicated shape, so what I want to do is kind of break it down to its simplest form. So when I see this, what I see is I see this edge here repeated a bunch of times over and over and over again, just slightly up and slightly wider. And then obviously there's a lot of detail here that needs to get solved, but I just am looking at this base shape and say, okay, this is what I'm going to duplicate a couple of times to actually get that object into the space. So this one I am going to do a cube, get it down kind of into its place. Great. And then go to vertex mode, and I'm in X-ray again, just so I can select the backside of these verts as well. It's hard to see just in the sideways view, but I want the back verts as well as the front verts for this. And then I'm just going to position one side of this into place. Okay. So again, it's going to kind of be the same thing as before. There's other ways to do this. Another way to do this is with booleans and bevels. I'm going to make a second cube here, and I'm going to match it to this silhouette. So we're going to take it, and again, it's actually going to be a lot of the same of edge loops and beveling. So I'm going to take my edge loop tool, create a couple edge loops around where I want them. And then I'll need a couple more to make the curves. Cool. So I'm going to take this edge loop and again, just bevel it and then add my segments and make this nice and smooth. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and shade auto smooth on that. So we want this object to be cut out from the other one. We're going to do this in the modifier panel. So you can do this manually in here of a Boolean and then select all the different objects, or you can click one and then a second object. And for me, it's Shift Control B to do Bool Tool. I think that also might actually be an add-on. Let me check real quick. Yep. So this should be part of the Blender toolset that comes with Blender. And I updated this keybind, I'm pretty sure, but you'll want to check this keybind if you're following along. But I'll click the two objects and then hit Control Shift B for me. And it basically pulls up the same menu. It just is a faster way of working. And again, all of these have keybinds, but we can just go in here. The difference between an auto Boolean and a brush Boolean is if it automatically applies the modifier for us. So if I go in and do a brush Boolean, you'll see that this modifier is now added to the modifier panel. And the really nice thing about this is I can take this object, which just is shaded as a box now, and I can move it around. So if I didn't, for example, have this at the right spot, I can just drag the object and pull it to somewhere else. And it's taking that original shape that I had here and moving it around and subtracting it from our model. So it was already in a pretty good spot, so I'll leave it there. But it's just a really nice way to work. If you're doing a really complicated asset, you can have a bunch of these all at the same time, and it's all non-destructive until we apply it at the end. So for now, I will go ahead and apply this, and then delete that object. And it's a weird shaded like this just because I had the other one auto-shaded. So I'll turn that one on as well. But now we've matched this silhouette here. So I'm going to take this and move that up a little bit. Cool. Also make that a little thinner just so it's in proportion to the sword. So now I have a couple different options. I think the way that I would approach this is I'm just going to duplicate this mesh a couple of times to get this shape because all of the insides are different. So I'll just duplicate the object. For me, that's Control D in industry standard. And then I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger and shift it over to where it lines up on our reference. And you'll see that from the side, it's just a little bit bigger. And I'll do that a couple more times here. All right, cool. So I'll make these more similar in size. And now what's left is to get these inside shapes. So this is going to be just like before. I'm actually going to hide a couple of the bigger ones so we can work on just one. We're just going to select verts and move them around basically. No matter where you are in modeling, this is something you just have to do eventually no matter what. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this just because you've seen me already do some vert modeling and it's really the same as before. So this will be something that I'll just leave for you guys to do really in your own time, but I'll just quickly mash it up so we have something to keep working off of. Next one. I'm just gonna delete those. Make that a little faster. Then I'm going to right click and merge the verts. And the reason I'm not doing the back and the front at the same time is they would all merge into the middle if I had all four selected. Cool. And then for this one, it is curved at the bottom, so I can bevel this and then add our segments again. And I accidentally deleted the face on this, so we'll just put that back. You'll also notice that I'm only doing one side because I'm going to mirror just like we did on the first object, the top of the blade. And I'm actually going to duplicate this one again because it has the same bottom as the other one. Just much higher. You can also select two edges and bridge edge loops if you don't want to do the vert merging. Okay, so now we have basically one half of this kind of blocked in for now. Again, I'm going to set this back up. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is just merge all of these together. So I'm just going to select all of them and then search for the join function. It's in this object menu somewhere, but it's just easier for me to type it in. So we'll just join these together. And what that does is I can just select all of these faces and edges just in the same object selection and move them around. I'm also going to apply the transformation. Blender can get kind of weird if all modeling softwares do this, but it can get weird if you start modeling verts and don't use the transformations all the time. And so it's easier just to do apply transformations and then reset this back up. But we also want the cursor at the origin point for the mirror modifier in a second. Also seeing that we're missing the back faces, so I will add those in. Okay. So for this one, when I do the mirror, I am going to hit bisect. I guess it's the Y. So that way it will actually apply just the side that we modeled to the other side. If I turn bisect off, it's just going to mirror it over its axis and not look super good. So bisect just cuts it in half along our mirror axis, which is right now this red line, and then combine it into one object. So this is much closer to what the reference actually looks like than what was there a second ago. We can go ahead and apply that because we would do more work on this. You'll see that there's bevels all over the place on this. I'm not going to do that currently, just because I know that there's going to be some adjustments that needs to happen after we model the rest of the sword. But later on, we will be adding bevels to this. And again, we can select edges and do that, or we can go into our modifier stack and apply a bevel modifier, and that'll do it for us. We'll go on to the handle of the sword. This one's also going to get kind of complicated when we add the spirals, but everything else should actually be really similar to what we've already done. So we'll add a cylinder this time instead of a cube. I like to turn shade auto smooth automatically on for cylinders just because they look bad shaded sharp. And we'll get this into place. And this is what I'm going to do is pretty standard for most cylindrical objects that you're going to work with. For a lot of this is adding edge loops where we want silhouette changes. So when I'm looking at the model here, there's some nice tapering that's done here, and our cylinder doesn't do that. So we'll just add edge loops on the outside and the inside points. So thinking of things like this bottom here flares out really wide. So we'll have an edge loop there, and one at the top here where it's the widest point of this cylinder, and then a couple in the middle for the details. Okay, so then we'll just select our edge. And again, this is in wireframe mode. If I were to select this not in wireframe mode, we're not grabbing the back faces, and that causes issues. So again, just in wireframe mode. And then we'll go ahead and make this a tiny bit bigger. And again, this is going to be one of those instances where the reference isn't perfectly straight on. So there's going to be some side-to-side differences, but we'll just do our best here. And again, that's really normal. There's no perfect reference in production. Cool, so that's pretty close. And now we'll just take our edge loops here and bevel these. The reason you want to do that is it'll make it flat in the middle for when we extrude these nice little edge loops that are the stops and starts of the golden part of the handle. If I were to, for example, just throw another edge loop underneath this face is still tilted on the angle instead of flat, and it can give you some unexpected results when you're in engine with lighting. So we're just going to make these flat for this, and that one's not perfectly flat. So we can go in and just make it a little bigger. This one doesn't have one until the bottom. So in this one, I know for sure is not gonna bevel properly. So I'll just select that bottom face and make it bigger. Okay. So now I'm also going to select all of these at the same time. To select multiple instances, you just hold shift and then can click again. So I'm just going to select all of these and then extrude them at the same time. That way they're all the exact same size. You can also extrude these out and then note your offset and just type that in every time, but that's not as quick. So this is when applying transformations becomes important. You'll see that this edge isn't really flowing properly. And that's because we did poly modeling without applying transformations. So I'm going to undo my bevel or my extrude and then apply our transformations and then do it again. Cool. So now everything is on the proper normal angle. All right. So that's the basic part of this. This is where the complicated part comes in, and this is going to be another part where I'm going to do the basics of it and then leave the cleanup for not this tutorial because it's going to take a while. In cutting grooves that are in a spiral pattern like this on a cylinder, that is a pretty complicated workflow. I think Blender makes it fairly simple, but the result is going to be some bad topology that we're going to have to clean up afterwards. Some other alternatives to doing it this way is taking it into like a modeling package. Blender does do modeling. I'm not that familiar with it, but like ZBrush is another one just to get it to look a little smoother. And you'll see why once we do that. This is where we're going to add that curve in. So again, if you haven't gone in and turned on the extra curve object, this is when this is needed. So turn that on. We're going to add a spiral at the bottom, or yep, a curve spiral. And we're going to use the first one. The other ones probably would work, but this is just the easiest one for me. And you'll see that it's added this nice spiral for us. We have a bunch of options here that we're going to use to get this curved pattern. So let's go ahead and put this using the location properties down where we need it to be. And then I'm going to change the radius. And it is not aligned with our sword. That's okay. We'll add some height growth in here, so that way as we add spirals, it will match what we want, and then add more turns just to increase it up. And then I'm going to change the rotation so that way it's pretty similar to what's there and I can match it better. That looks about right to me. So I'll go ahead and put that on the object so it's lined up properly. I'm just going to get it somewhat close here. So that is how I would get the spiral there. And then you'll notice that since this handle is tapered, it's not exactly following that handle very well. What I'm going to do is eventually turn this spiral into geometry and then cut it out to get that groove pattern. So we need it to actually follow this tapering on the handle. Let's do that. I'm going to go to add and add a lattice here. This is basically just a box that we can use to adjust other objects. It doesn't actually have any geometry. So I'm going to get this lattice and then change its size just to match the spiral properly. And then this side. Cool. So now we'll select the spiral, and if we quickly go to vertex mode, you'll see all these vertex when we were setting it up. This is important for the lattice because the lattice will adjust these vertices themselves. If there was only a couple verts, it wouldn't work this well. But since we have so many and we have this lattice, again, we will select the curve that we added, go to modifiers, and add our lattice modifier. Before I do that, I forgot to add extra edge loops to the lattice. You'll notice that they're not over here on this side. We have a lattice, a special data property for our lattice and our object parameters. So we'll go in here and add a couple lines on the W, which is our vertical. So now when we add our lattice modifier on the spiral, I'll click this eyedropper tool and click on the lattice to apply it to the modifier. And when I take this lattice and I move it around, it'll move that spiral around with me. So what I'm going to do is just take these and line them up so that way the spiral is matching the taper of the handle. And then this will be adjusted after the fact. And so I'm going a little quick here. So just get it kind of close. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. Okay. So because it's a modifier, it's non-destructive. So now I've clicked on the curve again, and I will go to the data section. Again, we have a custom data node for our curves. And I want to create geometry here because we're going to use it to cut out from the handle. I'm in that custom node. I'll click on geometry. There's a couple different options in here. We want this bevel option at the bottom. That will actually make it look like a pipe. If we do this extrude, it's just going to extrude a single plane. There are uses for that, but this is not one of them. So we have this pipe here. And then I'm also going to drop the resolution a little bit. We don't need that much geometry for this. And that's probably a little much, so put the back up to 1. So this is where we are going to actually have to match the spiral pretty well, because this is what's going to get cut out from our actual mesh. So if we look at this, it terminates just under these little edge loops that we added before. So what I'm going to do is try to get this top spiral to do the exact same thing of terminate underneath that edge loop. So we want it to go inside and under. The other thing we can do is also break this out into a separate object. I'm not going to do that right now, but that's an option. And then I'm going to follow the spiral around and make sure that it actually is intersecting with our handle the whole way around. So this is going to take a little bit of time. Ideally, we also want this on the same depth the entire way around, just so when we cut it out, everything is consistent. And then I always get lost while doing something like this just because it's so repetitive on the spiral. And then we'll take this bottom one and do the same thing as the top. Make sure it terminates at the right spot. Okay. So now we have that spiral more or less in the right spot. Again, if this was a production asset, I want to spend a little more time than that. The other important thing that we do is go into our bevel on the curve again and fill the caps. Blender doesn't like it to do bevels with objects that don't have watertight geometry again. So another reason that we'll need watertight geometry. Okay, so I am going to take this non-destructive workflow and make it destructive now. We're done with the lattice, so I'm going to go ahead and apply this modifier, and then I can delete the lattice out of the way, and we have these two objects. So again, we'll take these two selections, Control-Shift-B, or whatever you have that hotkey set to in Bool tool, and we'll do a different brush Boolean, just because I want this to still be an object. So now we have the spiral cut out from the handle of the sword. When you're looking at this, you're probably going to notice a lot of really weird looking angles in here. That's because of the object normals on these faces. This is when cleaning up is going to be important. We have all of this weird geometry that isn't connected, and all of these are n-gons, so it looks a little strange. Ideally, we would go in and clean all of these vertex up and make it look nice. The other thing that you can do is go into remesh and add some geometry in here so it's more smooth. This is still going to look strange just because of how much geometry is there and how it affects the normals. But when you remesh this back down again and decimate it back down to a lower value, it'll be easier to smooth out. So again, that's something I'm not going to do right now just because that's going to be a little more time consuming. And I will undo all of that just so I can have the modifier back. Okay. So you'll see at the bottom here that I missed some. This is just because the mesh was actually too far in right here. So what I would do is, again, undo a little bit more back where I can adjust the curve and go into some of these points and do some refinement. Just go back and forth a little bit and it'll get smoother. Again, I'm not going to do that right now just because it's going to take time, but I can go ahead and do that again for the bottom one just so it's on camera a second time. So actually looking at the bottom one, it looks like there's some detail there that I missed. So let me add that in real quick. Okay, cool. So we'll go in and add another spiral. So curve spirals. And that's back at its origin point. And it will save its settings that was there before. And we want these to be the same size because they're the same size in the reference. They just continue down even with this gap in the middle. So we'll go ahead and line that up. And since this is much longer than what I need, I can take some of these verts and delete them. And then I will set the origin here just so I can see my gizmo. That's just in that right-click menu. Add another lattice. It's fine. Add some segments on the up and down W axis. Go into our spiral, add the lattice modifier, eyedropper that lattice, and then I can go in here and adjust my lattice so the spiral matches much closer to the handle. Cool. Let me just get the geometry on here so we can see what that looks like. So I can adjust the lattice some more now. And then the top needs some adjustment. And then again, I will take the spline and fill the caps. And I can see that that's not all the way in. So I'm just going to do that one manually. In order to manually adjust the spline points, we'll have to apply this. Otherwise, it won't let you do that. So we'll just throw these inside. And then again, do that Boolean to get that cut in. So I want to do that a little bit better. I didn't undo quite far enough. There we go. Cool. So much closer. Okay. So leave that one there for now. And again, I'm going to go ahead and apply this and delete. Cool. Okay, so that's the majority of the handle done. Again, there's some vert cleanup that we'll need to get done in here in order to get it to smooth better. I just saved some poly count, but from any distance other than up close, it's going to look pretty okay. And the last one is the handle, or the tip of the handle at the very bottom. Again, this is nothing new. It's going to be the exact same thing that we've been doing. So I'll do this one by adding a cylinder. Oops. We can just go into the object properties and do this ourselves. That way the values are correct. And we'll just match these two. I'll call them Mickey Mouse ears because that's what they make me think of. And then we're going to make this one thinner. Okay, so now we have these two objects, and I'm just going to merge these together. So again, I'm going to use a Boolean for this and just hit the union option. I'm going to do auto because I know I'm not going to adjust this. And I'm going to go and delete these faces. Oh, that's weird. Huh. So I'll apply the object transformations then. Okay. So Blender is not wanting to play nice. So I will do this one. That way I can go in and set this. Now it wants to do it too. If you change the solver from exact to fast, sometimes it changes your results if it's not wanting to merge two things together. Okay, so now I'll go in and delete these front faces because they are not usable geometry. And then we have some extroverts left over that I will go ahead and clean up. So that'll be good enough for now. I will go ahead and bridge these two edge loops. And then remove that. And then I'm selecting the whole edge and making a new face, just because this geometry is much cleaner and more usable. It's an Ngon, but that will change. I'll add that edge loop at the bottom because now we're going to match the bottom here. And this is just going to be some manual vert pulling. Cool. So we have the general shape of the outside of this medallion. So I'm going to select these two faces here, and looking at the reference, I can see that there's an indent. It goes up and then it goes back down again. So I'm just going to basically do that. This is a new one I haven't done yet. Inset faces. What this does, it takes the face you have and it just shrinks it. It'll carry that geometry from the outside in. So this is why we wanted that clean face. And then I will do that again one more time so I can select this edge loop and extrude this out. And that'll give us that shape here. And then I'll take this and set it one more time and extrude it in. Cool, which gives us this little detail that's on the edge here. Looks like it's a little deeper than that too. This one. Okay. So now basically we're just doing that again, just with a circle with a pointed bottom. And then to get the gems that are here, we're going to cut with Booleans and again, do what we've been doing. Nothing is super special or super different here. Yeah, the nice thing about modeling is once you kind of understand what's going on, like there's not, like until you get to something that's super specific, there's not like a mystery. Some people have some different workflows that they like to do that are special or different, but really at the end of the day, it's pushing and pulling verts, however that works in your brain. So. I didn't go over this, but you should be saving as working. Let me see. Is this the... No, this was today's. Sorry, I've been practicing. No, wait. No, this is the done one. I practiced a couple of times to make sure I was prepared for this. But I mean, it's the same result. So just at the bottom here, you know, we just use Booleans to cut the stuff out and mirror it across. You know, this is what a more normal modifier stack would look like in progress while we're working. Again, eventually all of this will get merged down and disappear, but it just lets me move things and work a little non-destructively, just because it's quicker. If, for example, you were working on this and your art director said, hey, I don't want this to be a heart, I want this to be a circle, you know, I can go and change this and it'll update everything. So it just saves time. Yeah, this is kind of what I came up with. I think I missed a detail here on the blade. I didn't see that one until today. Yeah, this one is a little more polished in here. I have the bevel modifier on the blade guard. Yeah. I think next would be applying all of our modifiers and UVing and then texturing. For this asset, we could also do a high-low bake if that's something